I am super excited to have our next speaker, Rob Richardson. He is a software craftsman. I love that word. That's a good word. So he's done a lot of work in .NET and Node, React, and Vue. He's also a Microsoft MVP, an author, and speaker. He's awesome. Like, he's going to be talking about two things that I have delved in separately, which is GitHub Actions. And separately, I've worked a little bit now with Kubernetes, but I've not done stuff with them together. So I am super excited to have Rob, who is going to be our next speaker. So welcome, Rob. You can go ahead and start publishing out your content now, or presenting your screen.
And the moment that I go to click it is the moment that the buttons move and...
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get you all set up. There's your face.
That is not the right one. Did I unshare?
Nope, you're still there.
Okay, perfect.
So I'm gonna send you live, and you are on.
Very nice.
Bye.
So welcome everyone to Level Up Your DevOps with GitHub Actions and Kubernetes. This is a spot where I would show lots of slides, and I'm not really a fan of slides, especially in this talk. And so here's my one and only slide. Notepad, it's perfect. I'm Rob Richardson. You can reach me on Twitter at rob_rich, or grab the code for this at robrich.org. Let's head over to robrich.org and look at presentations. Here's the presentation today, and here's the code that we're going to look at today. Here it is. Well, kind of. It's an empty repository. Our task today is to fill this full of code. That'll be really cool. While we're here at robrich.org, let's click on About Me and learn a little bit more about Rob Richardson. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm a friend of Redgate. I really enjoyed the introduction. Thank you. AZ GiveCamp is really cool. AZ GiveCamp brings volunteer developers together with charities who otherwise couldn't afford software services. We start building software for them Friday after work. Sunday afternoon, we deliver that completed software back to the charities. Sleep is optional, caffeine provided. If you're in Phoenix, come join us for the next AZ GiveCamp. Or if you'd like a GiveCamp where you live, reach out to me on Twitter at rob_rich, or click the email button and let's get philanthropy installed in your area as well. Some of the other things that I've done, I worked on the Gulp team as a core contributor in version 2 and version 3. SQL source control basics, you saw that in my bio, the published author minus chapter 8. That was really fun. My claim to fame is I replied to a .NET Rocks podcast episode. They read my comment on the air and they sent me a mug. Woohoo! So there's my claim to fame. Okay, so we clicked on here, we clicked on the code, we pulled up this repository. Here's github.com/robrich, level up DevOps, GitHub Actions, and Kubernetes. And our task is to build this. Right now we have no code. This is a completely empty repository. Well, kind of. I went in here to settings and I went to secrets and I created a few secrets that we're going to use today. I just clicked on new secret and I gave it a name and I gave it a value and I clicked add secret. So we have a few secrets that we'll use as we get going. Here's kubeconfig that will allow us to authenticate into our AKS cluster. Here's that URL for AKS, the ACR username for our container registry, the URL and password for that registry. So we have those things set up in Azure. And now let's go build some code. So code. We have a completely empty repository. This is perfect. .NET new, let's say --help. And if we say --help, it will tell us a little bit about how we can build a new project. We'll say .NET new, we'll give it some options. Here's some templates. So we could build a console app or a WPF app or a unit test or a Blazor app. Let's say .NET new. We'll say MVC, it'll be an MVC app, --name, let's say level up DevOps, and we'll create it in the current directory with this dot, or --output dot. Okay, this will scaffold out a project. If we didn't do -- output dot, it would be in a subfolder, and that's okay. Dir, okay, we've got our code. Let's open it up in VS Code and take a look at it. Now we've got just a regular MVC project. Here's our index page. Here's our layout page. And so rather than just saying level up DevOps, let's say Nova, because we're here at the Northern Virginia Code Camp. It's pretty sweet. Okay, so we've got our site ready to go. And now we want to add this to a container. The first step in getting the Kubernetes is so you have a container. So let's start building out a container. Well, first thing I want to do is create a new file .gitignore. Now this gitignore is going to tell me all of the things that I don't want to check into my Git repository. So bin obj star.user.vs star.suo. I can enumerate all of the files that I don't want to check in. Now, as I start moving towards containers, the first file that I will build is a .dockerignore. Now, this dockerignore has the exact same syntax as a gitignore file. In fact, we can start off by just copying all of the content. And if we don't have a dockerignore, it will actually look to our gitignore and use that instead. That's pretty cool. Well, what else do we want to ignore? Well, we probably want to ignore app settings.development.json. We probably also want to ignore launch settings.json. Both of these are files that describe the development experience of our application, and we don't want that in production. We just want, well, everything else. Okay, so now that we've got the ignore file in place, let's build up the file that will allow us to describe what we want to do. So this is Dockerfile. Now we want to make sure that this is Dockerfile and not dockerfile.txt. This Dockerfile is the instructions of what we want to do to build up this container. Well, this is a .NET Core app, so let's head over to Docker Hub and let's go look for .NET Core. .NET Core. Here in .NET Core, we can take a look at the repositories. They have an SDK repository, one for ASP.NET, a runtime depths. Samples is really cool. If you're curious to see how to build ASP.NET Docker files or WPF Docker files, Samples is a great place to go. For .NET 5, they have similar mechanisms. Let's start out in .NET Core SDK. We want to learn how to build our app. Okay, so it says Docker pull, and here's the thing. If we scroll down a little bit, we can take a look at some of the tags. There's 3.1, there's latest, there's 3.1 Alpine. Alpine is based on Alpine Linux, and Alpine Linux is really tiny. So let's actually use the 3.1-Alpine build. That'll make our image a little bit smaller. So 3.1-Alpine. And now we're going to copy in all of our files from the directory that we launched the Docker build command to the directory inside of our image. Well, where is this directory? Let's say workdir is /src. That's the directory where we want to copy all of our content into. Okay, so run .NET build -c release. Well, before we do a build, we need to run .NET restore to restore all our NuGet packages. And then after this, we'll run .NET build -c release -o, or not build, .NET publish -o/dist. Okay, so I'm going to restore all my NuGet packages, build the solution, that'll build all the DLLs, and then publish it. That will get all of our content into a folder that we can copy up to Kubernetes. Now that publish command, that's not that unlike right-clicking and clicking publish inside of Visual Studio. And so we'll have that content ready to go. Well, right now I'm going to copy in all the files, then I'm going to restore, then I'm going to build. So if I change one JavaScript file or one C# file, it will redo all of the package restores. I really want to restore that once and take advantage of Docker's caching mechanisms to say, restore all the NuGet packages, and then on the next layer, copy in all the files. Now, if I'm only changing my source code, but I'm not changing my libraries, I don't need to reinstall my libraries again. Now on the build server, I do want to start over from scratch each time, but locally as I'm developing, I probably want to take this path so that my subsequent builds will be a lot faster. Well, I do need to tell it what it needs to build. So let's say copy level up devops.csproj into the current folder. Remember that current folder was defined here as src. So I'm copying in my manifest all of the packages that we'll need to restore. Then I'll run .NET restore. That will restore all my NuGet packages. Then I will build and publish after copying in all the rest of the files, except for those that I've chosen to ignore. And now I'm ready to go. I've got all of my content ready to go, and I can say cmd.net level up devops.dll. Well, kind of. I do need to set a few environment variables that will get us to where we need to go. ASP.NET Core environment will tell it its production. What port should I host on? Let's host on port 80 and expose port 80 so that Kubernetes knows to listen there as well. Now, this data is currently in dist. So let's say workdir /dist. Now we're ready to go. And this Docker file could be perfect. We've got all of our content ready to go. We could host this just fine, but there is one concern that we could adjust to make this even better. Right now, we have the SDK. We have the .NET build tools in our container. We also have all of our source code and all of the things associated with building our application. We probably don't need that in a production runtime environment. So let's go back to Docker Hub and take a look at the other things. Well, we have this SDK image, and we used that previously. We also have this ASP.NET image that just includes the .NET Core, ASP.NET Core runtime. Here's that image. And scrolling down again, we see that we still have tags associated with Alpine, so we can use it on a really small image. That's great. So now let's split these in half. Let's say from ASP.NET Core 3.1 Alpine. Now here, workdir, let's say this is /app. And now we want to copy content into this image. Let's copy from the dist folder into the app folder. Well, right now it would try to copy this dist folder from my local machine. That doesn't exist. Really, we want to copy from this other image that we created up here. So let's say --from equals build. Well, how did we create this, build image? Let's say this is as build. As build. Okay, so now we've built two images. This one we can think of as our build server, and this one we can think of our production runtime server. Now, technically, they're just two images, but we're starting over with this multi-stage build to say, let's start over from blank. Now we don't have our source code down here in this image. We only have our source code up here in this image. If everything works, then we'll copy our source code, our built assets down here into this image. Now we could also do some other things like run .NET test. In this case, we don't have any tests, so let's just comment that out. But that's the spot where we could run a lot of tests. Maybe we're going to kick off some Selenium tests or some Cypress tests. We also might want to run some unit tests, and that would be a great place to do it right there. Okay, we've got our Docker file ready to go. It's going to copy in our source code. It's going to build the .NET assemblies. It's going to publish that content into this dist folder. Starting from a new image, we have this app folder, set some environment variables that tells us how to start up. copy that dist folder into this application or into this app folder, and then launch.net to launch our website. That's perfect. Together with our Docker ignore file telling us what not to copy into place. And I think we're ready to go. Git status. Okay, we've got a lot of things that we want to commit. Let's come back into VS Code and let's look into the Git section. And let's say level up DevOps. Okay. Now we could go through each file, taking a look at what's different and what do we want to change, or just validating that our code is as we expect. We'll also look through here for which files should we include or exclude. Is our git ignore up to speed? And I think it is. So let's stage all these changes. And let's commit. Git status. Okay, we've got everything committed. Git push origin main. Now I have changed my default branch from master to main. And so that works out really, really well. There's a way to do that by default. And so I've actually done that. So creating this new repository will be main. And the moment that I push that up to Docker or to GitHub, then main is my default branch. Here we are in main. So we've got all this content up here ready to go. Now, how do we build it? How do we build a DevOps pipeline? That's exactly where we'll go next. GitHub Actions. Any questions so far before we dig into building a DevOps pipeline?
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any questions, so let's keep going.
Awesome. Cool. GitHub Actions. So now we have a site that we want to build, and we have a Docker file that describes how to build our image. Here in GitHub Actions, we can look through the various templates that they have. There's a lot of templates here that allow us to build in interesting ways. Here's some more. And so we can look at each one and kind of pick the one that best matches our construct. Hey, here's publish Docker container. Let's set up this Git flow. So it's going to create a Kubernetes or a GitHub Actions file, and what the name of it is less important. But let's name ours. What are we going to name ours? We are going to name ours Docker. And ultimately, the name is less important. It's just, what we choose to do here. But here in our Docker file, let's talk about the things that we need to do. Let's say this name is Docker build Kubernetes deploy. That's what we want it to do. Okay, so here in this file, first step is what we do. Right now it's on push in the main branch, and also on tags and also on pull requests. We probably only want to deploy on the main branch. We'll next create our build pipeline for how to handle pull requests in other branches. But for now, we just want to do the deployment on the main branch. If you're doing a pull request, we definitely don't want to publish your pull request up to our main site without doing some other verification. Okay, so what's our image name? Well, let's not do it that way. Here's our jobs. Here's what we're going to do. So we can simplify this down to just a single job. It will run on Ubuntu latest. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to check out the code. That's great. So now it has a repository and it's ready to go. Next, we want to do some content. Right here, it's going to run some tests. So it'll do this Docker compose up and, oh, Docker build. That sounds a lot like what we want to do. So let's do that. Let's do a Docker build. We probably want to tag this not as, we probably want to tag this to match the registry that we're going to send to. So this will be our ACR URL /level up DevOps. And then we'll probably want to say this is the GitHub version. And it's Docker file, so we don't need to specify that here. We probably want to swap in some of these. Well, we have some secrets. If we flip over to the documentation about how to use secrets, here's that mechanism. If we do $, curly brace, then we can start specifying interesting things to get at those secrets. Recall that we defined our secrets previously here in these settings. So we have one like ACR URL. Let's say $open settings or secrets .acr URL and level up DevOps. And then what's the Git version? This is github.sha. So now when we do a Docker build, it will tag it with our ACR URL, and our GitHub SHA is the version. So every time we push, we'll get a unique build number. That's perfect. Next, we probably want to do Docker push this same image. That will push it up to our, there it is. Docker push this, and that will push it up to our ACR, our Docker registry. Then we'll want to say kubectl apply-f k8s.yaml. Okay, we haven't built that k8s YAML file yet. Let's do that. So here, let's go back to here, and let's say new file, k8s.yaml. There's that Kubernetes YAML file. And let's pull some content in. Well, of course, the thing that we're going to do is we're going to go back to the last project that we did, and we're going to copy that YAML file, and we're going to paste it into place, and we're going to say, okay, you know, whatever we did last time, let's change this to level up DevOps. Okay, level up DevOps, the image label, the ACR URL, let's replace those at runtime. Level up DevOps. We've got all of the things in place. We have this deployment here in Kubernetes, which describes how we'll build pods. And here's our template for how to build that pod. It's going to go look for this container, level up DevOps, or ACR URL / level up DevOps, and grab that image label. It'll expose port 80. And then we have a service here that will tell us the particular details that we need about how to expose that publicly. We have this as a node port, so we'll get a port on each node in our cluster. And then we have an ingress controller here that will start to expose this publicly. In Azure, we have the ability to use HTTP application routing. And so we'll actually get some built-in DNS here to be able to leverage this to level up DevOps our URL for AKS. So that's perfect. We've got this ready to go, and we know that our image name is level up DevOps. That image name, level up DevOps, right here. Oh, level up DevOps is ready to go. So now we did need to replace some variables here. Let's reach out to sed to do that. Sed is a really cool command that allows us to replace, here we go, to replace some content. So sed -i, which means in place, -e, let's go look for ACR URL and replace it with secrets.acr URL. Let's also go look for AKS URL and replace that with the secret. Let's also go look for image label and replace it with the GitHub SHA. And we're going to do all of this in place in the k8s YAML file. That's cool. So that will transform this YAML file into place to have the proper GitHub SHA, the proper ACR URL, and that means that those secrets aren't exposed to our source control system at all. That's really cool. Well, we don't want this k8s YAML file to land in our Docker container, so let's adjust our Docker ignore file to ignore dockerfile.git and k8s.yaml. The other thing that we did to make sure that our secrets don't accidentally end up in our container is, even if we did forget that part, we're putting these secrets into place after we built our image. So the image gets built without the secrets in the YAML file, and then we put the secrets into place. That's cool. Okay, so we do a Docker build, a Docker push, a kubectl apply of this k8s YAML file with all of the secrets in place. Well, how do we know where, how do we log into Docker and log into Kubernetes? Well, let's do that next. And that's where we have this marketplace of really, really cool build systems that allow us to do really interesting things. Now here we said Docker build kubectl apply for this step, and it's just going to run the script. But we do have actions that allow us to do really, really interesting things. So, for example, let's look for log into a container registry. Ooh, Azure Container Registry login. Here's a task that will do that. Here's some of the stuff that tells us about it. And if we wanted to, we could dig off into the marketplace listing that will show us the specifics, the docs of how to do this. And we can probably also get to the GitHub repository that builds this action, which is pretty sweet. So right here, we have this button. Let's copy that into place and set it in place here. We do need to play with indenting a little because YAML. But here's that Azure Container Registry login. Okay, so what's the container registry name? Well, we have this secrets.acr username that we defined previously. What's the password? Well, that password is secrets.acr password. What's the registry URL? Well, we've defined that as well as secrets.acr URL. Cool. So now we're logged into our Docker registry. In this case, it runs on Azure Container Registry, but there's nothing Azure specific here. We could log into a registry on Docker Hub or in any cloud, public or private, and get to that registry as well. Okay, we're logged into Docker, so now we can push our container up to our URL. Let's log into Kubernetes so that we can use that kubectl apply. Okay, back here in the marketplace, let's look for Kubernetes Set Context. Azure Kubernetes Set Context. That's perfect. Let's copy this one and set it in place. And take a look at how to do this one. Okay, similar thing. We need to give it a mechanism. Now there's a method. Ooh, did they iterate this one since? Let's use this one instead. Delete. Let's go with Kubernetes Set Context. Copy, paste. Okay. So we start off and we say, what's the method? The default method is kubeconfig, and I think that's good. Let's use kubeconfig. Now I did copy the contents from my .kubeconfig file into place in that secret. So let's go pull out that content. We don't need the context, the k8s URL, and the k8s secret, because all of that will be in the secret that we have here. So what's that secret? Well, again, let's go reach into secrets.kubeconfig, and now we've got that content. Cool. So we're checking out our code. We're logging into our Docker registry so that we can push our container. We're logging into Kubernetes so that we can kubectl apply. And then we're just running Docker build, Docker push, kubectl apply once we put our secrets into place. The cool thing here is there's nothing cloud specific. This would work just fine pushing up to AWS or GCP. In this case, we've chosen to push up to Azure. Okay, let's start commit. This is our docker.yaml file, and we will commit that new file. In here, git pull. Let's go pull the git branch -u origin main git pull. Okay, so now we've grabbed that docker.yaml file, and we see that that docker.yaml file here inside this GitHub workflows is just another file in our repository. There's nothing special about it. We could modify it here if we wanted to. One of the things that we did, though, we've got this Kubernetes YAML, and we've updated our Docker ignore. So let's push those into place too. Kubernetes.yaml and Kubernetes YAML. That works. Let's stage these changes. Oh, we have a lot of content in here. I think that I may have switched folders. Git log, git status. Let's take a look at our repository. If I created this inside the demo folder, that may get interesting. File tree. Nope, they are at the root. So why do I have a resources folder inside the middle of my thing? Oh, I dragged the resources folder onto place. Here's my changes. My bad. So let's add this Docker ignore change and this Kubernetes YAML change. And now we will commit this and git status, git push origin main. Cool. So when we push, because we told this to create this build, automatically we're going to get this new build here in Actions. Now our last one failed. Of course it failed. It didn't know how to do all the things, but this one is actually kicking off right now. Let's dial into it and see how it's doing. Here's the stage that we set up. Apparently we named it test. And it's going to do that. Check out, log into Docker, log into Kubernetes. Now here's that Docker build. And so we just said, go run all of the content in that Docker file. And so it's doing exactly that. It's going to pull the content. It's going to work dir src, copy the project, .NET restore, copy all the rest of the content, build. It looks like the build succeeded. That's great. Now we're publishing. And then we publish to this folder, switch over to the new image, the runtime image. It's going to pull that content, and it looks like it's ready to go. Now, once it's built that image, it does the Docker build, kubectl apply, and we've got our image ready to go. It just told, it pushed that image up to Azure Container Registry, and it told Azure Kubernetes Service to launch the app. Now, the first time it launches the app, it may take a little bit for us to be able to browse directly to it. It takes a while for Docker, for the DNS settings to come into place. kubectl config get use context Rob Rich, kubectl get all. Now I'm here inside my Azure Kubernetes service, and I see that I have this level up DevOps service. I see I have this deployment. Here's that pod, and it's already running. So because it may take a minute for the ingress to spin up to this URL, let's do kubectl port forward. So I head over to the docs for port forwarding, and I can port forward into a deployment or a replica set. Ooh, let's port forward into the service. That sounds perfect. kubectl port forward. And in this case, we will say kubectl port forward service / level up DevOps. Port 80 on my machine may be taken, so let's say 8080 to port 80 inside my service. And now this will launch a proxy. So if I hit 127.0.0.1 on my local machine, port 8080, it will actually launch into that service. Here we go. Here's our application. We just built this. Here's Level Up DevOps. And we've got this homepage, Nova. We've got this ready to go. With any change in our source code, it will do exactly that. It will go build and build the image. If the image succeeds, it will publish that image into Docker Hub or Azure Container Registry in this case, and then start that on my Kubernetes cluster of choice, in this case, Azure Kubernetes Service. Now, right now, this only handles content on the main branch. It doesn't handle building for pull requests and doing other content. So let's do that. Well, we could come in here to Actions, and we could say new workflow and walk through that process of creating a template again. But at the end of the day, this file just happens to be a file inside GitHub /workflows directory. Here's our docker.yaml file. So we could just as easily, I don't know, create a new file. Let's create a new file here and call this dockerpr.yaml. Now here in dockerpr.yaml, we probably want to do pretty much what we did here, except for we probably don't want to deploy. So what are all the steps associated in deploying? Well, we log into our Azure Container Registry. Let's not do that. We log into Kubernetes to set our context. Let's not do that. We push. We don't need to push our image. Let's not do that. Changing secrets. We probably don't need to do that because we definitely don't want to apply this change in our pull request to Kubernetes. So basically what we want to do is just build our image and make sure it builds correctly. We probably don't even need to tag it. Okay, so we're going to do a Docker build. Now, all the steps in the Docker build where we have this process of doing build, publish, validate that everything works correctly. You know, we could even start up our container to run some integration tests if we wanted to, but right now, just the process of build and release are completely sufficient. Now, right now, we're doing this on branches main. Let's do this on branches that are not main. And let's also do this on pull requests. So on pull request. Okay, so on a pull request or on not main, then we want to do this. I think I need to actually go ** here. Nope, it's telling me that's not right. So on a pull request or on any other branch, we only want to do a Docker build. But on any other branch, we want to do this entire process. So let's go change a little bit more code here in our shared layout. We changed the title to Nova, but let's change the major callouts on our site to Nova as well. So here on our home page, on our index, welcome, Nova. KDS builds in GitHub Actions are awesome. Okay, let's take a look at our changes. We've added this new file, that's perfect. We've changed some code in this file, and we've changed some code in this file. Let's say added PR build and changed content and changed template. Commit that. Yeah, I am kind of mixing concerns here. Git status, git push origin main. And now let's head back to GitHub Actions. Actually, let's come here and, well, we've got a build running. That's awesome. Let's take a look at that build. Let's go to the details of this build, and it's getting ready to go. Setup job. It logged in. It did all the things. Now it's pulling the containers that we need to be able to build. Running that image. Copy the CS proj, run .NET restore, .NET build. The build succeeded, .NET publish, the publish succeeded, finish building that container, set all the environment variables. Now let's push this up to Azure Container Registry. Looks like we've got that layer pushed correctly. Now let's change the file and push that up to GitHub Actions. Perfect. Let's create that port forward again. And let's come to this website, and we've got our changes into place. Any change that we make in our GitHub repository, as soon as we push it, if the tests pass and if the build succeeds, we'll update live to our website. And any pull requests will validate the build, but won't push to production until we're ready. If we head back to our repository, here's Level Up DevOps with GitHub Actions. Now we have all of the source code for our application and the source code for our builds. So if you head up to robrich.org and click on presentations and now click on the source code for this, we have the source code live for this talk online right now. What's really cool is GitHub Actions can build anything, whether it's images or whether it's a website or an IoT project. GitHub Actions is a great place to build all your things. If your things land in containers, then it's great to be able to run those containers on Kubernetes, where we have that mechanism to be able to auto restart and auto scale these containers. So pairing GitHub Actions with Kubernetes works out really, really well. What are your questions?
Hey, Rob, thank you. So far, not too many questions, not any questions yet. Let's see. Yeah. But everyone, please, as you're listening, if you have any questions or anything else you want Rob to share, definitely feel free to post those in the chat. So Rob, just a quick question. Like, I love the presentations. It's been really cool.
Thanks.
Have you done any work with doing this maybe multi-cloud? So maybe deploying this to several like to Azure and to AWS or anything like that?
I have. And what's really cool in this, let's pull up this YAML file again. Close all. Here we're doing this in a very cloud agnostic way. So the only thing that made this Azure specific is we chose to define these secrets as Azure resources. But if we did this on Google Cloud or on Amazon's cloud, then we would just give it Amazon secrets. So how would we make this multi-cloud? Well, I would probably do something like this, where I say, now log into AWS and set this to the AWS config. And then I already have the image, but I probably need to tag it a little bit differently. So let's say Docker tag. I've got the old image name right here. let's give it a new image name on AWS. And then we'll push the AWS image into place. And we will add the AWS content into place. And this would be AWS URL. That's not quite right, but we're really close. And now we've got this pushing to both Azure and AWS at the same time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm super excited to see that because that's something I'm actually going to be tackling next week, working with one of my customers. So thanks for giving me the some cheat codes for next week.
Yeah, most definitely.
Cool. So I think I think we could probably wrap up a little bit early. If anyone has any questions for Rob, feel free. We have a Discord channel. Feel free to hop over to the cloud track and ask Rob questions, or if you have any kind of if you could drop maybe that link to your if you could drop maybe some links to yeah, that'd be perfect. Drop that in the chat. That'd be great.
Yeah, it looks like the chat isn't showing up while I've got my screen shown, but
that's
if we have a minute, one of the things that I often get, questions that I often get is, so how do I do a README badge? And so if we've got a minute, let's do that. This code accompanies the live demo talk about GitHub Actions and Kubernetes. Okay, so I've got this README file, and one of the things that I want to do is add a README to show the content. So here in Actions, I can take a look at a particular build. Let's look at this one. And now in this spot, create status badge. Ooh, let's copy that status markdown. I got it. And let's come in here into our README file. There's that badge that will do a Docker build Kubernetes deploy. Let's come to, nope, not there, here. Let's get the changes stashed. README and badge. Commit. Hit push origin main. And this is so magic. I love to watch this. This is so cool. Here's our build button, which is pretty cool. We could also go into GitHub Actions to go find it, but let's go find the details of this particular build. And it's going to go do all of the things. It will pull out our, it'll git clone, check out our code, set the details, build up the images, run the .NET build, run the .NET publish, run any of our tests if we had them, and ultimately build up those two images. It'll take the first image and throw it away. The second image, it's going to push up to Azure Container Registry. And then I think I might have committed the K8S file too. So this may actually get really interesting. Yeah, it's going to try to push to AWS, which of course is going to fail. And there it goes. It didn't. It pushed it up to AKS. And now back here on our homepage, in our README, we have this badge that will tell us the status of our build. That was really cool.
That was sweet. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think this was a really cool presentation. I think a lot of people are starting to get more involved in GitHub Actions. So definitely thank you so much for this presentation. I think we've got about 8 minutes before the top of the hour. So we'll probably just stop here, give everybody an 8-minute break, and then we'll come back at the top of the hour with our next
sounds like so much fun. I had so much fun presenting today. If you're watching this as a recording or you think of a question tomorrow, reach me on Twitter at rob_rich, and you can grab this code right now on robrich.org, link from there to GitHub. Thanks for letting me present today. This was so much fun.
Thanks, Rob.